George Blanda, Hall of
Powered by
Famer,
Riverside
has the
FM.
all-time record with 42 interceptions in a season. He did it in 1962 with the Houston Oilers of the AFL. He did it in 14 games, which means he threw 3 interceptions every game on average. Welcome to Just the Stats, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. My name is Ernie J, and I am the host of this new podcast. This is only our 3rd episode. So we will cover the statistical leaders of the NFL, from single game leaders to career leaders to teams, the entire team. So while other podcasts tend to spend their time talking about the gossip surrounding NFL players and so forth, and don't often cover the statistical numbers unless it's fantasy football. But then again, it's strictly on what kind of points do you think you're going to get from your fantasy football team. And I do like fantasy football, but this podcast is different in that we're going to be looking at these players on an all-time level. We looked at career leaders the last couple of episodes, and this time we will be looking at the single season leaders. What I wanted to cover first of all, though, is the fact that this podcast is set up hopefully in a way that's going to be entertaining and informative for you, the listener. So the way I'm going to do these podcasts is I started with the all-time career leaders, and then we're going to do the single season leaders, go to the single game leaders, cover the 2024 player and team stat leaders, look at the rookie records, and then we'll go team by team and cover each team and what that team did last year as far as the players go and where those players that played on those individual teams stand on team records. And then during the season, I will cover every team every week. So it's probably going to take several podcasts, at least 4, I'm sure, to cover every team. And what I'll do is give you how the team players did, where the team stands, and then were there any records that were broken or any that are on the way to being possibly broken. So that's the type of thing we'll cover during the season. But for now, we're just kind of laying the foundation for every team. And soon we will be getting into each individual team, starting with the AFC and working our way all the way through the NFC. So today we come back to single season record holders. So I hope you look forward to this episode of Just the Stats NFL. Here we go. So we'll start with the passing yards in a single season. That record is held by Peyton Manning with 5,477. He set that with the Denver Broncos in 2013. Very impressive season he had that year, because he also set the NFL record for touchdowns. Incredible season. What's interesting is he broke Drew Brees' record, which Drew Brees had set in 2011, 2 years earlier. Peyton Manning broke the record by 1 yard. Amazing. So those are the top 2. Tom Brady is third with 5,316. There are only 15 players that have passed for over 5,000 yards in a season. That's impressive. And just tells you in the entire NFL history how difficult it is to make it to 5,000 yards. So those are the only individuals that have done it so far. Let's see. Drew Brees is interesting because he's on this record 4 times in the top 10. That's amazing. He did, like I said, he had the record for 2 years and then was broken by Peyton Manning. But Drew Brees has this number 2 all-time mark, the number 6, 7, and 8 all-time marks. Very impressive. I mean, 4 times in the top 10. Patrick Mahomes is number 4 with 5,250. He's the highest ranking active player in the NFL. Did that in 2022, won the MVP that year, which you would think anybody who throws for 5,000 yards often is going to win the MVP, but not necessarily so. Patrick Mahomes is on the list twice of the top 15. He also, in 2018, threw for 5,097 yards. That ranks number 11. There's three other players that have thrown for over 5,000 yards in a single season. Justin Herbert, ranked number 15, did it with 5,014. He is the lowest on this list. Matthew Stafford with 5,038. And somebody, if you had to guess, and how many guesses would it take before you'd guess this name? But Jameis Winston is number 10 all time in passing yards in a single season with 5,109. He did it in 2019 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's just somebody you wouldn't think about when you're trying to figure out who would have been the characters that threw for 5,000 or more yards. What's also incredible about this record, it's only happened 15 times, is that 3 of them happened in 2011. In 2011, Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees, who had set the record at the time, all threw for 5,000 plus yards. So that's 3 out of the 15 came in that one season. And then a similar thing where it happened twice was when Peyton Manning threw for, which he broke Drew Brees' record. He threw for 5,477 in 2013. That same year, here's Drew Brees again, throwing for over 5,000 yards. So those 2 seasons. One more time, you had Ben Roethlisberger and Patrick Mahomes throwing for over 5,000 yards, with Ben Roethlisberger throwing for 5,129, which ranked number 9. Patrick Mahomes was ranked number 11 with 5,097. So it's something that you have 3 years where 2 or 3 players were involved in a record. And then you have several seasons you go where there's nobody that throws for that many yards. Let's look at what happened in 2024. Nobody threw for 5,000 yards. Joe Burrow was closest. He had 4,918 yards. He came close. Second was Jared Goff, only had 46. I say only, that's still good. But like I said, Joe Burrow came the closest this year. All right, let's look at passing touchdowns. One more thing about the passing yards that I forgot to mention. Dan Marino is the only player that predates the year 2000. Dan Marino set the record in 1984 with 5,084. First player to pass for over 5,000 yards. And then, actually, Dan Marino held the record for 20 plus years. It wasn't until 2011 when Drew Brees broke the record. So it was more than that, actually, for how long he held the record. So Dan Marino's the only one on the list that was before the year 2000. On the top 15, there's 4 active players on the top 15. So that tells you that, like I said, with a lot of records, this is a record I think will be broken at some point by somebody. It's just a matter of time. Let's look at passing touchdowns now. The leader in passing touchdowns is Peyton Manning, as I said, the same year that he set the record for yards. He also set the record for touchdowns in a single season with 55 in 2013. There's only 3 players that have 50 or more. Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes also have 50 apiece. Tom Brady did it in 2007, first person to hit 50 touchdowns, and his record then was broken in 2013 by Peyton Manning when he reached 55, and Patrick Mahomes did it in 2018, the same year that he threw for 5,097 yards. Tom Brady, when he threw his 50, was the year they had a regular season where they went undefeated. So those are the top 3, only 3 that hit 50 or more. And then You have Peyton Manning again, who had threw 49. Dan Marino, who held the record until Peyton Manning came along, had it in 1984. That year, he threw for over 5,000 yards. He threw 48 touchdowns, and then in 2004, Peyton Manning threw 49, which set the record, which then was broken by Tom Brady, who in turn was beaten again by Peyton Manning when he threw his 55. So that shows you a record that can be broken. And again, when you look at the top 18 players, there's 18 players that have thrown 41 or more touchdown passes, and only 22 that have thrown 40 or more. So when you look at the list, though, half of them are active players. Though one of them is Aaron Rodgers, who's on the list a couple of times, and Matthew Stafford's on the list a couple of times. Patrick Mahomes, of course, is on the list already a couple of times. So you have some players, several current players on this list. So I see that this is a record that I think will be broken at some point. So let's look at a couple of other things about it. Like I said, Drew Brees on this list a couple of times. One of the times, though, when he threw 43 touchdowns in 2012, he also threw 19 interceptions, which was a career high for him. In 2024, let's look at this last year in touchdowns. So, like I said, there are 41 or more touchdown passes in a single season. There's 18. It happened 18 times. Out of those, 3 of them happened last year, with Joe Burrow throwing 43 touchdowns and Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson each throwing 41 touchdowns. So Joe Burrow led the league in, led the league in completions, attempts, yards, and touchdowns. So you had 3, which just tells you again, the passing game, how incredible it is in this age. After them, it's dropped off to 37 with Jared Goff. 12 of the top 15 seasons with 41 or more touchdown passes all happened after the year 2000. All right, let's look at passes intercepted. This is a record that I do not think will be broken. You would think most records have a chance of being broken, but just like we were talking about with career interception leaders, I don't see the record ever getting broken. No team is going to allow a quarterback to throw the amount of interceptions that they threw in the past. So the leader was George Blanda, Hall of Famer. He has the all-time record with 42 interceptions in a season. He did it in 1962 with the Houston Oilers of the AFL. He did it in 14 games, which means he threw 3 interceptions every game on average. If he'd have played a 17-game season, that's 51. That's an incredible amount of interceptions, and to not get benched. And he didn't. The modern era record, if you want to say that, would be Vinny Testaverde, who is second on the list with 35. He threw those in 1988 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those are the top 2 players. Frank Tribuca, 1960 through 34. George Blanda is on the list again with 30, tied with the only player that is active today on the list, and that is Jameis Winston. The year that he threw all those passing yards, he also threw 30 interceptions. He had 33 TDs that year, but 30 interceptions. He's tied for 7th all-time in interceptions in a season with 30. And there are only 12 players that have thrown 30 or more, and he's one of them. After him, when you're looking at active players, you have to go a long way down the list to get to the next player. And in fact, to get to the next player, you have to go to Joe Flacco, who in 2013 threw 22 interceptions, which ties him for 117th on the all-time list. That's how far down you have to go to the next player. So, like I said, I don't see George Blanda's record set in 1962. I don't see it being broken. So we're talking 63 years it's been a record, and no one's really getting close. Looking at this 2024 season, two players had 16. So it tells you again how far they are from the old days. Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins each threw 16 interceptions last year. The biggest difference between the two is that Mayfield had 41 touchdowns to his 16 interceptions, while Kirk Cousins only had 18 touchdowns to his 16 interceptions. Geno Smith was third with 15 interceptions. He had 21 touchdowns. Then you have a drop down to several players with 12 interceptions. So Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins had a lot of interceptions. I like Baker Mayfield. Didn't realize, I guess, how many interceptions he threw, but that's really a lot. He needs to cut that down this coming year to be competitive. All right, those are your passing statistics. Let's look at some of the rushing statistics for a single season. And we'll start with rushing yards. The leader in rushing yards is Eric Dickerson, who ran for 2,105 yards in 1984. He's the all-time leader. He's only won over 2,100 yards. Adrian Peterson came close to breaking his record when he rushed for 2,097 yards, only 8 yards away. He did that in 2012 with the Minnesota Vikings. What's incredible about that is that he came back from tearing his ACL and his MCL and had a season like that. That's amazing, honestly. Jamal Lewis was third with 2,066 in 2003. In that year, he set the record for the most yards in a single game with 295 yards rushing. Barry Sanders was fourth with 2,053. And then in fifth was your first player active today. Derrick Henry had 2,027 yards. And then you have a couple more, and Saquon Barkley just cracked the 2,000-yard mark this year with 2,005, just beating out O.J. Simpson, who had 2,003. There's only 9 players, and they're all different. 9 players that have made it to the 2,000-yard mark. O.J. Simpson did it in 14 games. So that's impressive. He averaged 143 yards a game rushing. Wow. Derrick Henry came the closest to making the list twice. He has the number 11 ranked seasonal lead with 1,921. He did that just last year, the same year that Saquon Barkley had his 2005. That's the closest anybody's come to having 2 seasons with 2,000 or more yards. So we'll see if either one can do that this year. I mean, as long as they stay healthy, I think Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry could have seasons where they hit the 2,000-yard mark. But we'll see. Barry Sanders is one that came close. He's got the number 13 mark and the number 4 mark. Let's see. So last year, 2024, the leading rushers were definitely top heavy with Barkley and Henry. Saquon Barkley had this 2,005. Derrick Henry had 1,921. Number 3 was Bijan Robinson, way back at 1,456 yards. A big drop from the top 2. Big drop. And then it tailed off after that. But quite a drop from those top 2. Though I think that somebody like Jonathan Taylor has a chance to put up numbers like that. Josh Jacobs, maybe. We'll see. But really, not a lot of players that have the kind of ability of Barkley and Henry to put up the yards and stay healthy. That's Jonathan Taylor's problem. It's just having a season where he stays healthy. Even last year when he had over 1,400 yards, he was 4th last year. He only played 14 games and he didn't play them all. He didn't complete them all. So, if he plays 17 games, he has a chance to move higher up. Saquon Barkley hit the 2005 mark in just 16 games being played. So it's possible he would have broke Eric Dickerson's record if he'd have played that one more game. But he sat it out, which is the right thing to do. All right. So those are your leading rushers. Let's look at the rushing touchdown leaders. All right. The rushing touchdown leaders are LaDainian Tomlinson, who had 28 touchdowns in a single season for the San Diego Chargers in the year 2006. Now, like I've said this, where I don't think the interception records can get broken the way the NFL is today. This is a record that, and I'm not sure why, but this is a record that could stand. You don't see players rushing for 20 touchdowns in a single season, let alone 28. I'm just not sure if this record's something that can be broken unless teams change the way they play, or they have a player who they just hand the ball off when every time they get anywhere near the end zone, and he can actually get in the end zone. So we'll see. But LaDainian Tomlinson had 28 touchdowns in 2006. Sean Alexander and Priest Holmes each had 27. Sean Alexander did it in 2005. So he sets the record in 2005. The next year, LaDainian Tomlinson breaks it in 2006. Emmitt Smith had 25, John Riggins 24, and then it's a drop down to several players with 21. On the list, Priest Holmes did it twice. He had 21 and 27. The only player on the list who was on it twice. Actually, I'm wrong. Emmitt Smith did it twice as well, with 25 one season and 21 in one season. But LaDainian Tomlinson had the 28. The closest active player on the list is tied for 15 with 18 touchdowns, and that was Raheem Mostert, had 18 in 2023, and Jonathan Taylor had 18 in 2021. Those two are tied for 15th all time. Derrick Henry and Jamal Williams tied for 26 with 17 apiece. And Derrick Henry did that in 2020 with Tennessee. Looking at the active players, those are the top ones. LaDainian Tomlinson had 28 touchdowns. And when you throw in the fact that he had 3 receiving touchdowns, he had 31 total touchdowns in a season, almost 2 touchdowns a game. That I'm not sure that can be broken. It's quite a record. Then looking at last season, there were 3 players all tied for the lead with touchdowns, and they were Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, and James Cook. All had 16 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs had 15, and then you had a couple players with 14. So 16, not even close to 20. It's just not easy to do. I mean, 16 touchdowns is incredible. That's a touchdown a game. Impressive. Henry, who's been so consistent, like I said, he had 17. He's had 16 a couple of times. Is somebody that I think will possibly break Emmitt Smith's record of 164 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns in a career. Henry's got 106 right now. So give him 5 years, not into the 5th season. I think at the rate he's going, he could definitely catch Emmitt Smith if he plays that long. That's the only caveat. Will he play long enough to break the record? But the pace he's on, he has a good chance to do it. All right. That is our episode for today. I want to thank you for listening. The next one will cover receptions, we'll cover scoring, and we'll cover defense. So those are the things we'll be looking at next time on just the stats NFL. I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to this podcast, and I thank you in advance for doing so. Until next time, I'm out of here.